I don't know. I reeked like heating oil. I reeked like number one diesel. Like I was soaked in it. And actually not only did it break my hand, but it set me on fire. So,
oh my gosh.
So my coat was on fire. My pants were on fire. And we got in a little bit of snow, kind of like we have out there right now. And so I stopped, dropped, and rolled, and it worked.
It finally,
I did it.
You finally got the opportunity.
I did stop, drop, and roll, and it worked.
We thought that was going to be a much bigger deal as kids when they told us, stop, drop, and roll, and you actually got to do it. So your wife and the kid, how many kids do you have at this point?
I think we had 2. Yeah, we had 2. The 2 boys.
She's in misery because she just got her wisdom teeth pulled.
Yeah.
You're trying to reheat the house.
Yep.
Fuel can blows up. You're on fire. You're stopping, dropping, rolling.
She is downstairs, yeah.
And then, so what do you do after that? Like, what does that scene look like when you walk in the house?
I pulled my glove off, and I was like, well, hopefully I'm going to make knives. I figured they could probably put it back together.
Oh, sure. You're like, hey, this is my livelihood.
Yeah,
here.
I kind of need my hands. So it was like after I stopped, dropped, and rolled. My hand didn't hurt, but it just felt wrong. Like something felt wrong because adrenaline was like coursing through my body.
I bet,
So I run inside. It's still this 55-gallon drum is raging still, and it's right next to this little knife shop that I had built on my father-in-law's property, like right next to the little cabin that we were renting from him. And I'm worried it's going to catch the tiny knife shop on fire. And so I run inside. I sit down on our little entryway floor, and I start. And I think I pulled out my phone. My wife says, "Zeke, is everything okay?" And I said, "There's a little fire outside." She reminds me that I said there was a little fire outside, and she said she looked out the window of the kitchen. And she's like, "That's not little," And so I called 911, and I think I had told her like I broke my hand or something like that, and I called 911, and then I stepped back outside because I'm still worried that this drum is going to catch the shop on fire, and there's like wood nearby. I think it had caught some other stuff on fire a little bit, but not the cabin that it was or the shop it was right next to. And so I'm on the phone with dispatch, and I can't use this hand. This one's all screwed up.
Yeah.
And I've got my phone pinched between my shoulder and my chin, and I've got a shovel. And I'm talking to the lady. She's like, "Sir, just stay away from the fire." And I'm like, "Yes, ma'am." And I'm shoveling with one hand. And I didn't stay away from the fire. But because I was like, I can't burn down my father-in-law's house.
Yeah.
Like I can't do that. And so they showed up, and it was really interesting. My wife and kids went over to the neighbors, and fire truck rolled up on the street in front of the house. And the one guy says, he's like, the one fireman hops out and he's like, "Hey, can you give me a hand with this hose?" And I said, "Sure. I've only got one hand to do it, but yeah, I guess so."
I literally just got blown up.
Hose.
Yeah, I got blown up 20 minutes ago, but I'll help you out. Yeah.
So anyway, it was a miracle. The miracle in it was that I didn't inhale the diesel, flaming diesel droplets. They kept checking my breathing. They said, if you inhale that, you can breathe for a while, but it scorches your lungs, and there's nothing we can do, and you die.
Yeah, those inhalation burns are no joke.
And it's like you're surprised, so you probably go
yep.
when it happens, but it happens so fast, I guess. I mean,
and the fact that you were standing
my life.
right over it.
Yes.
It's hard to believe how you didn't inhale
I know.
the inferno that shot up in front of your face. Or you didn't get any singed, like no singed eyebrows or like
maybe
hair
my eyebrows a little bit.
Yeah.
Probably my eyebrows a little bit, but I think that was about it. I don't know. It was amazing. So
that's crazy.
Yeah, so that was one of my surgeries, was getting the hand fixed. Later that afternoon, I'm laying in Dr. V. Meister's. I was laying in his I was curled up by his little fireplace that he has in his waiting room or in his little foyer there at the front desk, and I was laying on the floor. I just felt awful. I was just wiped out. They had given me painkiller and stuff.
Yeah.
On the way to I think I just went straight to the doctor's office.
Really?
Maybe I went to emergency room and then doctor's office, and they got me in that day.
Okay,
and
gotcha.
Fixed my
Sometimes
hand.
that's how it works. They're like, especially like for a hand thing, especially
Yeah.
because you work with your hands.
Yeah.
You make sure that you're not going to die. That's what the
Yeah.
ER is for. Make sure there wasn't any inhalation burns.
Right.
But then, a lot of times these docs, especially locally, they're like, hey, we got this guy with and Dr. Viehmeister, he's the hand guy.
Yeah.
I think there's some other ones on the peninsula
Yeah.
now, but he was probably the guy during that time. And he's like, send him over.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's wild, man.
So it was wild. Yeah. It was a lesson in trust in God, because it was interesting. I had been praying, my wife and I both, that God would provide for us. And it was like he just kicked me when I was down. It felt like. It was like he kind of kicked me in the back of the knees. And then after that, I was laying in the hospital, just crushed, waiting for my surgery. And my pastor came to visit, and I just broke down. And I said, I thought that I was trusting God, and he hasn't come through for me. And that was never thought. I'd never really had those kind of thoughts before, but I felt like, man, I have been trusting him. And I realized trust in God it's not real if you have limits on how much you're going to trust him. And I realized that I had limits on it. It was like, well, only to this certain extent do I trust him, and I realized that, I wasn't trusting him completely, because I said, well, you better start providing for me at this point, I didn't actually say that, but that's kind of how I was acting. And then after that, God did really good things. Like tons of people gave us money. A bunch of people gave us money to support us. It was pretty amazing. Some kind of had to move out of our house, not because of that, but because the septic had some issues, because we were too big of a family to be living in that house. And there was a guy that just said that I knew, had contact in a long time, who reached out and said, hey, I've got 2 houses. He's like, you want to stay in this one till you're up and running?
Wow.
And so it was really neat. Yeah, it was like we felt very loved by God through his people.
Yeah.
At that point, and we really needed that.
Yeah, I think we think that things should go a certain way. Like, this is what provision looks like. It's me landing this amazing job or having this amazing opportunity.
Yeah.
Usually no pain involved. You usually don't expect the exploding fuel barrel, to get you to the provision.
Yeah, that's right.
But sometimes that's what it takes. I
pretty
guess.
wild. Yeah.
Jeez, man. Well, I'm happy that everything worked out for you, and
thank
that
you.
You got both your hands to.
They work. This one's crooked. This finger's
Oh,
crooked.
yeah. I do see it.
But I can touch my palm, and this one is kind of hard pressed. Yeah. Well, I can touch this one to my palm, but like the knuckles burn when I do it. And this one, I did my physical therapy. So
cool.
I've got great range of motion.
Sweet.
With them.
And you got you need those hands to make the amazing knives that you do.
Yeah.
I'm so glad I got to check out your shop last week when Dr. Bob, if you're listening, Dr. Bob was the one that, connected us, and you're like, hey, you got to check out this guy, Zeke. He's got this awesome blade shop. Yeah. And I think what he's doing is super cool. And sure enough, I go and meet with you, and I'm like, yes, Zeke is a cool guy. And 2, the product that you're making is amazing, and the quality is there. And the more I learn about bladesmithing, the more I realize why that is, because bladesmithing is different from knife making.
That's right.
And it's because of the time, the attention to detail, and really just like the craft. It's a whole like artistic craft that you do.
Yes.
It's more than just,
grabbing a piece of steel and grinding it.
Exactly.
Nothing against those people at all.
And for that to be your livelihood and your trade and profession is amazing. I told you when we met, I was like, when I think of a bladesmith, I'm thinking of like a oh gosh, Lord of the Rings, the short guys, what are they called?
Oh, the dwarves.
The dwarves. I'm
Yes.
thinking of like, the dwarves and, in the mines, just, forging and banging steel. Like, this is a ancient craft.
It is.
So it's crazy to think that this is your job.
It is. Yeah. My full-time job.
It's your full-time gig. And I do want to get into the story on how you got there, but I just think it's super cool that, like, if you're going around town, just living life, people like to have small talk. Hey, what do you do? I'm a bladesmith.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, that's right.
my name is Zeke Johnston, right?
Yeah.
Zeke Johnston. Yeah. Maker of blades, forger of steel. Like, I would have so much fun with like my intro to what I do for work. You don't seem like that kind of guy that's going to be super like prideful about your craft. You're super eagegoing, and I think you truly love what you do.
I do.
But I would have a lot of fun with it because it's just it's uncommon, and I think we're going to get into a lot of why I think it's really cool, but. I do want to kind of hear that story. Like, okay. So you grew up here in Alaska, born and raised here.
Yeah.
And just kind of walk me through, just like start with your childhood. Like what was, you grew up here, you came from a big family, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So just kind of tell me about your upbringing and what kind of spurred you on to look into maybe being a bladesmith. Okay.
Yeah. Sounds good. So, birth is kind of interesting because we were living in the small town of Seldovia. It's actually the name Seldovia is actually Russian. It's pronounced Seldovaya, from what I understand. And we were living. My parents and I'm fourth out of 9. So my parents and brothers and sister were living in the town of Seldovia. And my mom was pregnant with me, went into labor, and the doctor loaded us into his. And I always have to pause and think because I always get the cowboy hat and the airplane mixed up. Stetson is the hat and Stinson is the bush plane.
Yeah.
He had a Stinson bush plane, and he loaded my parents into his bush plane and flew across Kachemak Bay to Homer. And I was born, I think it was like half an hour later. And then
cutting it close.
yeah, it was close from what I've heard.
Yeah.
And then I heard they ran to McDonald's and then went home afterwards.
That's what you do when you're in town.
Yeah, you go to McDonald's. There was no McDonald's in Seldovia, so
there's not a whole lot of anything in Seldovia.
No.
I mean, I've been there recently, and there still isn't.
There's still not
much over there.
Yeah, I haven't been there in a long time, but yeah. So we kind of moved up the peninsula. My dad was a pastor, and he pastored a couple of churches. Actually, that's why we were in Seldovia.
Okay,
I want to say he was a youth pastor there. I think at a little church there. And then we kind of moved up the peninsula, and really kind of the transformative years of my life were from like where I started having like lots of good memories. Happened when we moved to Ninilchik. So we lived on this 160 acre homestead. The house has been bulldozed since then, just because it was like added onto like 4 times. Started as a cabin and has a 34 acre hayfield out front. We still go visit it like almost every year because the nostalgia is strong.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, so we grew up there, had a tiny family farm. And that was kind of from the love of animals from my oldest brother. So we had a couple of meat cows at different times, had a milk cow, and had some pigs. They were like furry, like hairy pigs, like looked like they were sows, but looked like they're Russian hairy pigs, basically. 2 sows, their names were Bob and Ed. I think my brother was wishing they had been males or something like that. I don't know. They looked like males, covered in hair. But
that's awesome.
Just had a variety of animals and stuff. And we were homeschooled. So being homeschooled, I don't know if it was being homeschooled that kind of produced the love of reading that I have or what, but I did not grow up with a TV. So books were the way you kind of entertained yourself with stories because we didn't have a TV, didn't have a computer or anything like that. So, so during that time, one thing I did love was Legos, and I loved anything relating to like anything medieval. So spears, swords, shields, knights, all of that good stuff.
Yeah.
And then I started reading books. So that's kind of where that was kind of the seed that was planted of that kind of grew into being a grown up. Yeah. Still a little boy inside, loving sharp steel and things like that. And so I would get these like windlass steel crafts and museum replicas magazines, and I would like drool over the pages and seeing like battle ready swords and stuff like that. Yeah. And but then from that point, we ended up moving up the peninsula. My dad took a pastorate in the city of Kenai. And when we were attending that church, I think we moved when I was 14. We left Ninilchik and moved to Kenai. And there was a friend of mine there and at the church, a young kid that I befriended. And I would go over to his house pretty regularly. And his dad made knives through what's called stock removal method. So it's cutting and grinding where you take a piece of some kind of a high carbon steel and you cut it and you grind it to shape. But you're not forging it. Mm-hmm. Forging it doesn't necessarily make the steel better or the blade better, but it's a way of shaping it. So, and then he was trying to not overheat the steel so that to not ruin whatever kind of a heat treatment existing heat treatment the steel had. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of his method. But I was seeing these, I saw my friend showed me a couple of knives and like at least 2 swords. And then his dad actually made me a sword later on. And I was just blown away. Like, whoa, he's actually making these? Like he can do it at like his house. Like I had no point of reference for how that worked. I think I may have known you heat steel up and hammer on it, or they used to. Mm-hmm. It was more of I think I believe that they used to do it, but probably not anymore is kind of the concept. So when I was 15 years old, so this is 23, I think I said 23 years ago almost. In August, it'll be 23 years. So I was 15 years old and we had the only cow in Kenai within city limits. Actually put her in the paper. The reason that's important is we had like a cow shed out back. Okay. And we had sold our cow. And so that was available for turning into a knife shop for me. Gotcha. So I bought a stone bench grinder, like stone wheeled bench grinder, which is not the right tool for the job, but I didn't know any better. And I think I bought an angle grinder and maybe I had an electric drill or something like that. And I started making knives, stock removal method, kind of following in the steps of my friend's dad. Mm-hmm. The problem with my knives, though, is that they were what would kind of be considered a Scandinavian grind that I was putting on them, which I'm not a fan, really, of the Scandinavian grind. Some people swear by them.
What is it?
So it's basically, if you look at a knife, you typically see like deep plunge lines from where you can tell a grinder like dug into the knife blade right up near the handle. Mm. And then it's ground forward from there. And the grind of the knife basically goes from the edge up towards the spine of the knife. Now, a Scandinavian ground knife, it usually just has a little bevel ground in down near the edge. Okay. And because cutting is a 2-part operation, you've got the primary bevel, that's the part that cuts you or shaves hair if it's really sharp. And then you have the secondary bevel, which is basically shown by the fact that there's plunge lines. You can tell that the knife is either flat ground or hollow ground up towards the spine from there. Well, a Scandinavian ground knife has just very, very shallow bevel right down near the edge. Okay. And because cutting is a 2-part operation, there's the primary bevel, the part that cuts you or shaves hair, that initiates the cut or starts the cutting process. And then how the knife is ground from that point up is the follow through, or the knife or cutting tool passing through whatever it is you're cutting, which is just as important as the sharpened edge. And Scandinavian ground knives, I don't want to throw them all in the same boat. People would say there's a reason that they exist. And I would say, yeah, and there's a method to the madness of a Scandinavian ground knife too. And there's a reason why some people like them. But they don't tend to pass through what you're cutting as well, unless it's some soft medium like meat or something like that. So I was grinding these knives, very shallow bevels. It's hard to sharpen them, and they don't pass through what you're cutting very well. And I just didn't know any better.
Sure.
So I was making these knives.
And you're 15.
I was 15. Yeah.
So you're just like figuring it out as you go based off of, this friend's dad.
Yeah, that's right. And I think I asked him a few questions now and then. I don't recall going to him for a lot of advice.
You just saw that like, hey, this is something you can do. And then you were like, I want to do that.
I'm in. It's like, too. I like knives.
Yeah.
So the first thing I made was a dagger. I actually still have it. I kind of reworked it later on, and I wish I hadn't have. I wish I'd left it the way it was originally. Sure. But I made a dagger. I think the blade was somewhere around 11 inches long or something.
Okay, cool.
And that was pretty awesome in my mind.
Yeah.
And kind of a giddy little kid, like I've
totally
never had a dagger before.
Yeah, I doubt as a 15-year-old you're like, I'm just going to make this little 3-inch blade. Like you're like,
yeah, that's right.
You're going
go
big
or go home.
Go big or go home.
Yeah.
So what do your parents think? Like, I mean, I'm thinking like, okay, 15 years old. Most kids that are maybe not homeschooled or playing sports or like doing, right. I don't know, maybe they're do Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, and you're making blades, which is pretty cool.
They didn't seem to mind.
Yeah, parents are just like, go for it.
They shipped me off to Bristol Bay when I was 15.
Yeah, so talk about that. So I think, and this is not that long ago. If you're just listening, Zeke isn't an old man. Like he's like not even 40 yet. But
I'm pushing, but not quite there.
So yeah, how did that opportunity come up? Was it like someone you knew, or it was just an opportunity to make some money? Like how did that work? And then your parents were just like, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so it was there is a family that lives in Nikiski, and every year they go to Bristol Bay. And this is kind of like, so it started with the dad or the grandfather who has since passed away. And then he's got 3 sons, and then they've all got kids, and it's a generational thing.
Okay.
And they've all taken part in commercial fishing, some set net and some drift. Mm-hmm. The two main methods of gill netting for salmon. So yeah, I think, I don't remember exactly how it all panned out. I think let's see, my oldest brother, I was going to be fishing with him on the grandfather's boat.
Okay.
So it was kind of like, older brother's there to kind of keep an eye on him a little bit and keep him out of trouble. And then, so that was my first year. And it was my first of two years in a row, commercial fishing. So I think there was the understanding that I would have some supervision, and my parents trusted the gentleman that we were fishing for. Yeah. And they were family friends. I wouldn't say, relatively close in their own way. Mm-hmm. Like we were good and close friends with this gentleman's son and daughter-in-law and their family. So that's kind of what allowed for me to go do that.
Yeah, I think about like the age, and I think we might even be past this. I mean, growing up, the term helicopter parent was a phrase.
Yeah, that's right.
And if that was the case when I was a kid, I don't know if we've kind of moved past that, or if parents are even more, up in their children's lives and controlling what they do. But there's got to be a pretty cool experience to be 15 years old, going to Bristol Bay to commercial fish, and you're just like, those are probably memories that you'll have forever of you, like, especially at that age, just of, that rite of passage, becoming, a man's man, and, figuring stuff out on your own, and you're working.
It was brutal,
You're
too.
away from home. Yeah.
The fishing, I say brutal, and to give people a little bit of a comparison, not every commercial fishing experience is created equal. I want to say that, but so I don't want to broad brushstroke too much. But my oldest brother, how many years did he do it for? Like 30 years or something. He commercial fished, and so he didn't do crabbing, but he long lined for black cod and halibut, like out of Sand Point, down in the Aleutians, and he salmon fished, and he seine fished, like herring seine.
Okay, yeah.
So he experienced a lot of different commercial fishing opportunities. And one of the things that was interesting is one of the years with one of the crews that he fished with, they actually had a guy who was an Army Ranger, or had been an Army Ranger. And he actually told my brother and the other crew, he said, it was this guy's first time doing it. And he's like, if you guys can do this for a living, you could easily become Rangers. Like, this is, this will kick your butt.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I remember being a 15-year-old and 16-year-old kid, and I had never worked so hard in my life. And we were raised to work hard. I milked a cow by hand and stuff. Like, I helped with that growing up.
Yeah.
And helped with baling hay, like throwing hay bales, bucking hay by hand and stuff. So I wasn't unused to hard work. This was like next level.
Yeah.
And I always kind of look back at my years commercial fishing, and I go, well, I don't love it, but I'm glad I had the experience.
Yeah.
And other jobs that I've worked since then, I've always kind of kept it in the back of my mind, like, it's not as bad. At the end of the day, I'm going home and I'm dry, and and I'll get a full night of sleep, and I'll wake up and I can do it again. And commercial fishing is just, you run ragged. They keep opening you, and you sleep a couple hours maybe and head back out, and it's good for building character
for sure. And I think that's an important quality, I think, to pass on to our kids, is that hard work is good.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I think kids want to avoid it. Yeah. I think it's probably human nature to avoid difficult things, but hard things are good to experience. And I think especially early on, I feel like a theme of this podcast is always coming back to family and parenting and kids stuff. I don't know. It just seems, and faith, for some reason, every person I've had on here has talked about their faith in some way or another. I'm sure people listening are like, are you trying to convert me? And I'm like, I promise I'm not. There's these amazing people out there that just have, this faith in God. And
we just met.
It's a part of their lives. Yeah, totally. Yeah, exactly. But there is something about like going through those hard times as a 15-year-old, the hard work that does really shape you for the future. And I think that as a parent, we want to protect our kids from hard things. As soon as the opportunity comes up for my kids to go and do something where I'm like, hey, you're going to be put to work for a little bit. And if that's, away from me as a parent, I'm like, I'd probably be okay with that. Yeah. It's probably going to develop something in them that I wouldn't be able to do.
That's right.
As, the safe place for them right now,
right.
And that they'll be shaped by that later on. But since we're on the family topic right now, we'll get into, I want to definitely get into how you go, from beginning to end and how you craft your blades for sure. But for the people that are listening, Zeke's like skill and the time and effort that he puts into these blades is like next to none. I think that if you were to give an estimate on how much time you spend on one knife, does it depend on what kind it is that you're making? And the wood, is that a hard thing to kind of quantify?
It's not a hard thing to quantify for my simplest design. So I want to say up front, like the vast majority of the knives I build are hand forged. Mm-hmm. So heated in a forge, hammered with my power hammer and hand hammers. Yeah. That's the vast majority. And those are the blades I take most pride in. We have taken on building some water jetted knives. So there are design cut out with high pressure water, a blank cut out with high pressure water that has an aggregate, so it can actually cut the steel. And I want to make the distinction because it's not the same thing. It's not the same experience, right? Mm-hmm. So those blades haven't been forged to shape. Yeah. And but that being said, that's the reason that we started producing just a few different models is because I can produce them at a little bit lower price point, and they're clearly labeled, water jetted. They're just as high of quality. Mm-hmm. The finished product is just as high quality, but I can produce them a little bit faster. So if it's a water jetted knife, like one of our simplest water jetted knives, like our Chickadee model, it's a 3-inch blade. Yeah. It's 7 inches overall, but it's a very simple very simple design. One of those I could probably build start to finish in a day.
Okay.
But if it's forged, it would take me, if it's a simple, say something similar, but in a forged blade, because the process of shaping and the heat treating process is longer for a forged blade, it would probably take me 2 days start to finish for a simple one. But then, and that's for a non-Damascus blade. So once you start adding in like forge welded steels, so if it's Sanmai, which is 3 layers of steel, or our Damascus, which currently we're making 54. I say we. I am making 54. I say we because it's me and my wife's business.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
But we're making 54 layer Damascus. So that process takes a full day. So from grabbing 2 different sticks of steel, one that contains nickel and one that doesn't, and going through the whole process of making the Damascus from 2 bars of steel to where you have like a forged blade at the end, that's a full day.
Gotcha.
Of cutting and grinding and forge welding and stacking and doing it again.
Gotcha.
And then stretching out the billet or the bar of steel and then forging a blade off the end of it. So, yeah. So that process is much longer.
Okay.
And then if the blade is a small, like an everyday carry, 3 to 4 inch drop point blade, which is super easy to forge, that's going to be much faster to make than, say, like a chef's knife that's Damascus. That's way more steel and way more forging. And that's going to take like several days to make.
Gotcha.
So,
well, the finished product is amazing. For whether it's the one that takes you a day or 2 days. And when I think about like just the process, and you kind of gave me a glimpse of it when I was over at your shop, your website does a like amazing job of outlining that process from beginning to end as well. But the finished product is beautiful, and it's something that I think of when I look at a knife like that. It looks so nice, but it's more than just something that's pretty that you want to put on a shelf. There's utility to it. It's a tool. It's meant to be used.
100%.
And you have that in mind when you're making these. Like this isn't just like a token knife that you have hanging up. I mean, I guess you could do that if you wanted to.
I'm always disappointed when people do.
Right? Yeah.
I mean, it's okay. It's their knife, right?
Yeah. But I think of like just being in Alaska. You got this bladesmith that's on the Kenai Peninsula, and you're making these beautiful knives. And there's no shortage of Alaskans out there that are using knives.
Right.
And especially to think about like, when you have a blade, it is a tool, but there's a legacy aspect to that blade because they usually last unless you lose it,
right?
which happens. When I first moved to Alaska, so my father-in-law, he passed away a few years ago, but he was doing all the Alaskan things and very much wanted to hunt, fish, just soak up everything that Alaska had to offer. And after he passed away, you go through all the belongings and everything like that, and found a whole lot of knives, just all different kinds. And one stood out the most to me. It was this Benchmade knife. It was just kind of an everyday carry, like short little pocket knife. I showed it to you at your shop.
That's right.
And it's like worn. It's it's been used. It's been carried. Like the clip that is kind of bent a little bit, but it still works. It's still functional. You can still sharpen it. You can still use it. And Dad's gone, but I have this knife that is in a way like a
kind of like an heirloom.
An heirloom, exactly.
Yeah, that's right.
And so it's nice to have, because if you carry it every day, or even like if it's something that you take out when you go fishing or you're camping, or you're hunting or whatever, you're going and doing these things, but you're bringing along something that someone else used that you cared about.
Right.
And it makes it that much more special. And when you have something that was like handcrafted, like what you're doing, and you just think about like the big picture of like this blade that was so much time and attention was put into it from the moment that it was created to now you're creating your own memories with it. And then to have such a quality product that you could pass down to someone else.
Yes.
It's awesome. It's cool. It's like it is like a legacy type thing, and it's more than just going to Sportsman's and picking up a Gerber off the shelf or whatever. Like I mean, they're nice, I'm sure, but like there's just a different feeling with
There
having
is.
that.
Yeah, it's interesting. A bladesmith kind of wears many hats. And just to give people an idea of kind of what makes it, as you're saying, such an heirloom product is, if it's one of our forged blades, first I have to play blacksmith, even though I'm a terrible blacksmith. Mm-hmm. A blacksmith is different from a bladesmith, right? Mm-hmm. It's both use heat and hammers and hot steel, but I'm a terrible ornate blacksmith. So yeah, you kind of play the part of the blacksmith to forge the blade, and then you're machining things by hand. And as I mentioned to you when you came over, it's like all the knives that we machine or that I'm grinding are ground freehand. So mm-hmm. there's no jigs. I don't have any kind of a table for resting blades on as I'm pulling it across the belt of our 2x72 belt grinder. They're all freehand ground. So you're playing the part of a machinist, machining blades, and then you're playing the part of a metallurgist because you're heat treating. And that you can't fly by the seat of your pants when you're doing that. Mm-hmm. Like you have to know exactly what you're doing when you're heat treating. And then after heat treating, you're finish grinding, which is like really kind of the hard part of knife making. Mm. It's one of the big hard parts of knife making is finish grinding. Mm. And then if you're soldering, like you're working with brass and nickel silver for guards, and then you're a woodworker because you're working with wood.
That's true. We haven't even got into that part. Like, people using you have antlers and horns and a bunch of different
hardwood from South America. I just got a box from a friend who didn't need the little parts and pieces, but are perfect for what I need it for. And so there's just this whole process, and kind of what makes bladesmithing unique is that you're trying to master. You have to master all of these different things, and then you're finishing the knife, but then you're moving on to leather work if you do your own leather work, which I do.
Which you do,
yeah. So it's a kind of a compilation of all these different things that come together, kind of at the crescendo of the finished handmade knife. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what makes it so heirloom. It's like you look at it, and I say this unbraggadociously, but like I'm thrilled when I see. I haven't always been thrilled with all my knives, and every once in a while I still go, "That's not my favorite. It's not bad. It's not my favorite." But it's the little kid inside me that's playing with big boy tools, and getting to produce something that I've always been fascinated with.
Yeah.
So,
and that's my thought is that my son and my daughter will get to a point to where I feel like there should be some kind of token or rite of passage or
coming of age,
right. Something that happens. And my default idea is that a blade kind of says that.
It does.
Because it's sharp. You can hurt yourself with it. You can hurt other people with it. There's a certain level of trust that has to go into giving it to someone. That's right. Especially your own child, right? Yeah, especially as right. Depending on what that age is, I'm trying to still sort that out. But I think it would mean a lot to them as well to be on the receiving end of that. Even more so if if I had one that they saw me carry and use, right. and it was memories they had of, us fishing or hunting, and that was Dad's knife. Right. And then someday I'm not around, and now they still have that. Like it's really really special. Yeah, it is super special, and I think that time's going to come when I hit you up for one of those knives for sure.
Sounds good. Yeah.
So I want to talk about kind of like the. Well, actually, no. I did want to share this story, and maybe you have one similar that you can share. If not, that's fine. But when I can't remember now if it was my wife or her sister, but kind of in that like passing on that trust. Okay. So my father-in-law did give a knife to, I think I'm blanking if it was my wife or her sister, but they were out camping and they were like, "I want to give you this knife," because you're at the age where you want to, sharpen sticks and like make little spears and stuff. Like, right? Especially if you're camping, like it's just part of the name of the game. And so his rule was, if you cut yourself, I'm taking it back. Like that was it. Like if you you can use it if you need it, but if you cut yourself, I'm taking it back.
Yeah.
And I think it was like that night. Like it didn't take long.
Oh, no.
Like they cut themselves and Dad was like, well, sorry, like not there yet.
Right.
And so there is, it's kind of funny, but there's that level of trust that has to be there. Do you have any memories of, not crossing the line, but, doing something you weren't supposed to, or cut yourself or anything like that? Or were you always pretty responsible with the blades as a kid?
I'm sure I did cut myself a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
We had the rule growing up that you had to be 10 years old in order to get a knife.
Okay.
I remember getting, I think it was my first knife. It was a buck 110, a folder.
Mm.
And those are really nice folding knives. For a mass-produced knife, they're really well made. Kind of a large folder.
Okay.
I think I'd asked for it. And I don't know if it was, I want to say it was for Christmas one year. I don't know if it was my first knife or not. I can't recall.
Mm-hmm.
But and I don't remember the stipulations except that it was at this age you get a knife.
Okay.
Until that age you're too young.
Mm-hmm.
I've taken a little bit different approach with my kids because I feel like it's easy to if you're parenting and you just set an age as a qualifier for being able to do certain things, take certain steps in life. I feel like if you just set an age, some people are, some of your kids are going to be at one level of maturity and some at another. Some are going to be really crazy when they're older, and some are going to be like super responsible when they're younger.
Yeah.
And responsibility varies, it's at varying degrees. And so what we've done with our kids is, well, can you control yourself when you're angry? That's one of the things that I look at and I say, well, in fact, I won't say the names, but one of our sons, he got a knife really young, and then the other one, he reached that age, and I said, if you can be responsible with, I think it was, some of it was anger. I think I put it off for a year. And then he was getting right up to the point in which he was listening well. He was being responsible with things like his bow and arrows. Mm-hmm. And we had the rule, like, you can only shoot at the target when it's in front of the backstop. And it was like, Manny, this was like right before his birthday.
Okay.
And a couple of my other kids were outside, and he turned with his bow and he shot like right past him. And it was like, well, there went your chance for your knife.
Yeah. Not
happening this year. And I think it was, I can't remember if it was a full year later. I think maybe it was. I said, a knife is a tool. Yeah, but any knife can be a weapon. And I don't label knives as weapons because most of them aren't even intended to be. But knives can be a weapon in the wrong hands. Mm-hmm. And it's just a sharp cutting tool. No different than a lawnmower going over somebody's foot is not a weapon, but used in the wrong way, it can hurt people if you're not responsible. And so that responsibility, we kind of, my wife and I look at like, well, how self-controlled are you when you're angry? Like, do you get frustrated and talk through it, or do you hit and bite?
Yeah.
and kick and that sort of thing. And we've had to deal with some of that with a couple of our kids, and not with the other ones. And so it's like, boy, the qualifications for when you get an edged tool in your hand is going to vary. Totally. And it's less on age and more on responsibility. But it was just kind of growing up for me, it was just kind of the age. It was like 10 years old, you get a knife. Yeah. So,
well, there was 9 of you. So
there was 9 of us.
Mom and Dad were like, I don't know if we got time to really hone in on where you all are at. Let's just make it 10.
That's right.
10 years old across the board. I didn't think of it
like that. That's probably, that probably played.
And you have 5 kids. I don't know if we mentioned that.
We have 5 kids.
So you got 5.
2 boys and 3 girls.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So that makes sense, just kind of gauging it based off of them individually when to do that.
Yeah, because I don't, I've kind of realized with the education system and stuff, we cookie cutter everything in this culture. I'm not saying my parents did poorly in raising our, me and my brothers and sisters, but just I've kind of noticed that we kind of cookie cutter everything with the education system, and we kind of do it with maybe to some extent the medical system, and maybe we do it a little bit with parenting too. It's like everybody, it's easy that way. You feed everybody the same thing in the like you make dinner. It's like, I don't care if you don't like that. You eat it because I made it. Yeah. That kind of a mindset. And it's easy to transfer that to education and that sort of thing, which we homeschool our kids. So it's a little easier to adapt some of that, but still viewing kids as being very much individuals with different strengths and weaknesses. And that's not really bad. It's just he's built different as far as like one of our boys is just has a super hard time sitting still. I still have to parent. Yeah. It's like you still have to be respectful and control yourself. But at the same time, he can do way more stuff while he's listening, and he'll get it. Yeah. Typically. Just kind of gauging parenting according to the individual kid, I've noticed. And so we kind of do that with responsibility with knives and things like that. Yeah.
It makes me think, like, just listening to your story and hearing how like you parent your kids, there's a lot of things that I see in my own kids that, qualities that they kind of shine at, things that they do really well, and then areas where they are not so great and they need a lot more help. And realizing that the things that they're doing now could very much be a part of the rest of their life if I allow it, if I encourage it, and if I feed that.
Right.
But I think when you do try to cram them into the cookie cutter, like you're like this, but you need to be like this.
Yeah.
It does seem to kind of be, opposing thoughts. Like, your strengths are here, but we need you to be more like this. And
yes,
I think you're right. My wife's a school teacher, and she sees it in her own classroom.
Sure.
Like you have this system that you're a part of, and you are trying to do the best you can with the variety of kids that you have, but then the structure is very much like, this is what it is, and this is what you have to work with. And so it's kind of a hard position to be in for teachers, because I feel like they see that that just like parents see that.
That's right.
And that's the other aspect of having to, there's some parents that are like, it's your job to make my kid smart. And there's some teachers that are like, well, your kid is really smart in this, but not so much in this. But the way the society and the education system is set up is, well, you have to do this standard for all things. And some kids just aren't gonna.
Yeah. Otherwise, you're not smart.
Otherwise, you're not smart. Yeah.
There's a book that I really recommend, kind of on this topic, which is Visual Thinking.
Huh. Okay.
And I'm trying to remember. There's a movie made about this lady. She's autistic, and her name may come to me. But Visual Thinking is the name of the book. And she basically goes through and talks about how she sees in pictures in her mind. And it was really neat. It was actually kind of exciting, because although I graduated, there were certain things I didn't really finish. And I had brothers and sisters who did like so much better than me in school. But that was really kind of because I was geared towards hands-on, and I think visually, and I'm more creative. And I'm not saying there's no place, for some things to be kind of cookie cutter. Like I personally believe that every child should learn to read and write well.
Sure.
And if you can read, you can do anything. And I think those things are important. But on the other hand, it's like we really push other things that I don't think are maybe quite as important as we have been led to believe. I'll put it that way. Yeah. So, yeah.
What in your mind makes a quality knife?
Oh boy, that's a can of worms. No, it's not really a can of worms. What makes a quality knife? So it is, so there's several different factors. I would say, number one, it must be sharp. Number two, it must be ground well. Number three, it must have a proper heat treat. Number four, it must be comfortable in your hand. And number 5, it should look nice.
Yeah.
And we're usually drawn to the
I was going to say,
one,
yeah.
right?
So for me, going into your shop, what's the first thing I see?
Oh,
My gosh, this is beautiful.
Yeah.
But working backwards, all of those other things are there too, and your time and attention goes to each of those. So
I try to put those in the order that I believe is important.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can pick up a rock that is sharp and will cut you, and you can say, I have no knife, and you'll use the rock, and that works. But then you can have something that is sharp, and maybe you can skin an animal, but if you're going to cut potatoes or an apple with that rock, you're going to be using it like a hammer to bust that thing into.
Yeah.
And so that's why the grind of the knife is very important. And then the heat treat of the knife is important. Like, you could have a knife that is a good cutting tool because it's sharp at the edge and it passes through what you're cutting well. But if it doesn't have a quality heat treatment, then it's not going to be able to do that repeatedly. So it's not going to hold its edge for long.
Yeah.
And if it has a good heat treat and it passes through what you're cutting well, but it hurts your hand when you use it, that's not a quality knife. And because, that the handle is the interaction between the blade and the end user.
Yeah.
And then if it's ugly, it just depends on whether you care if it's ugly or not.
Yeah.
As long as it meets those other qualifications.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So take me through the process.
Okay.
I know you can probably get like super deep into every aspect of this,
Okay.
but if we could just like break it down into kind of those big chunks of the process, but starting with forging. And one thing that I didn't, and maybe you can talk about this, I'm not sure if it's in this section or not, but Damascus has a unique design pattern to it.
Right.
I think I just realized that happens. Does that happen during the forging process?
It happens during the forge welding process.
Forge welding process. Okay.
Right.
Which is really unique. And for a just person that doesn't know how that is created, honestly, I'm thinking that's like laser engraved or something like that. For the person that has no idea, not realizing
think it is. Yeah.
Not realizing that that's happening during that forge welding, right?
That's right.
Is what you do with those.
Yeah. It's a very violent process.
Yeah. So go ahead and take me through that.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah. So the first step in making our knives is forging, and forging is essentially heating steel to where it becomes malleable, so it can be shaped with a hammer. So forging doesn't necessarily make a better blade than somebody taking a piece of quality steel and cutting it and grinding it to shape and then heat treating it. But it opens up like so many more options. Within forging is, as you mentioned, making Damascus. That's forge welding. So if you don't forge, you're probably not making Damascus either. Generally speaking. So I heat up a piece of steel. I use I use Damascus, and then I use a steel called 80 CRV2. So depending on what knife I'm choosing to make, or if it's a custom order, which I take from people, I select the steel type, and then I shape the blade and the tang of the knife. So the piece that goes into the handle, that forms the handle,
is the tang.
There's two main. There's other kind of funky tang types, but the two main ones are what are called hidden tang and full tang.
Okay.
A lot of people will kind of get the term full tang mixed up with hidden tang or concealed tang. They'll say, "Is that a full tang knife?" So they're looking at a knife that has the tang inserted in the handle, and you can't see the tang. And they'll say, "Is that full tang?" And what they're saying is, does that tang pass most of the way through the handle, or all the way to the end of the handle?
Okay.
And I understand the concept, but the terminology is just wrong. Full tang is a knife that you can see from the spine of the knife all the way around,
Okay.
and back up underneath to the edge. So you're seeing the tang, and it's got handle scales affixed to it.
Okay.
So for a hidden tang knife, it's whatever length of tang the smith believes he needs for that particular knife, because that will vary a little bit depending on the knife and what it's used for. And that's inserted into a block of wood. If it goes all the way through the handle and into like a butt cap, like you see on swords and daggers typically, that's called a through tang. Okay. So it goes all the way through the handle. If it's hidden, or concealed, it's hidden inside. And if it's full, you see that it goes fully all the way around.
Okay.
So those are kind of the two main are hidden and full tang. And I guess you'd say through tang is pretty common too. So the knife being forged as it's heated, I heat it up in a gas forge that I made. It burns, it runs off of, it's fed by propane. So liquid propane.
Is that what you call the dragon?
Yes, that is the dragon.
Yeah. There's a cool video on your YouTube.
Yeah.
About
it kind of blew up.
Lighting the dragon.
Lighting the dragon. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. You can find it, the YouTube channel's Alaska Blade Studio.
At Alaska Blade Studio.
Alaska Blade Studio. Yeah. The name of our business, Alaska Blade Studio. So, so I built that forge when I went full time, which I guess we haven't got quite up to the point in which I, started forging, kind of talking about that.
True.
But basically we, I want to say it was like 5 years ago, on 6 years ago that we went full time doing the bladesmithing business. And I built that forge, and it's been awesome. So I had built forges previously and kind of figured out what I wanted at that point. And it's been a rock star. I mean, it's been a really, really good forge. So I heat the piece of steel in the forge, and we've got a power hammer that is very proudly American made. It's made in Minnesota by a family-owned and operated company called Kins Custom Iron. It's got a 75-pound ram, so the part that goes up and down is 75 pounds, which is honestly kind of small for a power hammer. They make smaller ones, but it's big in the shop because it speeds up the process of me shaping blades and making Damascus so that I don't have to do it 100% by hand. Okay. And I say our blades are hand forged. They are, because my hands holding tongs and using the power hammer. And I also forge the tips of our blades in by hand as well, like with a hand hammer on an anvil that is 150 or 200 years old. Wow. It's old. It's well over an antique. It's actually made in England. It's a Peter Wright. It's 124 pounds. It's not big as far as anvils go, but it's really high quality. And so that's the forging of the blade, shaping it with hammer, fire, and tongs. And so basically what that does is it allows us to make efficient use of the steel. And it also cuts down on the grinding process, which kind of comes next. Okay. So the blade is forged to shape. The blade is stretched out. The tip is forged in. The tang is stretched out from it, because I make a lot of hidden tang, which are just as good as full tang. Yeah. There's some people believe that, if it's not full tang, it's not as strong. That's very much not the case. And we can talk about that if we get to that. But just as good a quality if it's built right. And then you move on next to annealing. So annealing is, I kind of like to describe it as like a person that goes out and they work really hard, and they come home and their muscles are tight and they're sore, and they go soak in a hot tub for an hour or whatever it is. And that heat soaks into their muscles and it relaxes their muscles, and their body starts to repair. Now, with the way annealing works is very similar. You stick the blade into the forge after it's completely done being forged and straightened pretty close to what it needs to be. And you bring the steel, the whole blade. I stick it in tang first, heat the tang, then stick it in blade first, and bring that whole blade up to really close to critical temperature, which is where you would quench a blade, like to harden it ordinarily. But you bring it pretty close to critical temperature. And then I stick it in a bucket of wood ash, and the wood ash is already burned, right? It's just burned wood. Yeah. So it doesn't ignite from this super hot piece of steel, but it insulates the steel and it allows it the molecules to relax, and it de-stresses that steel from all of the forging and shaping.
Okay.
And because I mean, you think about it, it's pretty brutal what's happening to the steel being shaped. So that allows it to the steel to relax, and then from that point, I do a rough grind. So I start to kind of define the bevels. I clean up the profile of the knife on our 2x72 belt grinder, which is American made in California by a company called Ameribraid. I can't say enough good things about the company. So I clean up the profile of the knife. I kind of rough it in. When blades go to be heat treated, they can warp.
Okay.
So there's an old blacksmith saying that is forge thick, grind thin. And you want to forge the blade and leave it on the thicker side so that when you go to heat treat it, it doesn't warp. And if it does warp, you can correct it in the grinding. So you rough and grind, and then I rough and grind, and then I stamp the blade. So I have a custom maker's mark that's actually the initials of my first and last name, which my name is Ezekiel, not Zeke.
Yeah.
So it's an EJ, an E on top of a J, a custom stamp I had made. So it gets stamped before the blade is hardened, and then I move on to the hardening of the blade, and that's kind of what I call breathing life into the blade. So the blade is heated at critical temperature. It's called austenite. Austenite. It transforms to austenite. We won't go into down the rabbit hole too much, but basically, if you let the blade cool at that point, it gets soft. If you let it cool slowly, it gets soft. If you quench it in some kind of a quenching medium, which we use we use a vegetable oil, a heated vegetable oil, it basically freezes the blade in that state.
Okay.
And it hardens it to where it's like glass hard. Now, one of the mistakes I see, I haven't watched Forged and Fire in a long time, but you would see guys coming out of the forge and quenching their blade and then pulling it out and checking it with a file, and they say, it's not hard yet. And they go back into the forge and they'll quench that thing like 3 times in a row. And the problem is they didn't set it on the bench and let it cool, because although the vast majority of the hardening happens as soon as you quench it, it doesn't completely harden until it's cooled to room temperature. It's like, leave that thing alone, let it do its thing. And it's like that initial quenching starts the process of hardening. It does the majority of the hardening, but then that blade continues to cool and continues to harden when it sits on the bench. So at that point, the blade is what is called untempered martensite. So it's extremely hard. It's so hard that you could drop it like point first on a concrete floor to break the tip off.
Wow.
And so what you need is a serviceable blade, a blade that's a serviceable hardness that you can sharpen but will hold an edge well and is going to be tough. So I temper it at 350 degrees for an hour, and a steel starts to soften or to temper around 340. So I like to leave my blades as hard as I can leave them so they hold an edge really well. That doesn't mean my blades are brittle. That's each blade is heat treated specific to its task. So I don't make wimpy knives that are going to break easy. But yeah, the tempering process is what comes next, and it's heating that blade up to 350 degrees is what I do, and for an hour. So I just gave my recipe away. It's not really any kind of a secret for me, but and that relaxes the molecules, that martensite, just a little bit, and it's then called tempered martensite. And then I move on to finish grinding the knife, and I go through several grits of belts on my belt grinder. And then if it's a hollow ground knife, so hollow ground is concave.
Okay.
The bevels are ground concave. Flat ground, they're ground flat. Depends on the purpose of the knife that kind of determines the grind.
Okay.
And if it's hollow ground, I do a finish grind to the knife. So I move down to these really fine, like plastic belts. They're like a polymer belt that's impregnated with like aluminum oxide or something. And they leave like a super nice finish. And then the knife is at its finest finish. And that's with a 400 grit. belt. But if it's like one of my like premium Damascus knives, then I flat grind it. Like pretty much no matter what it is, I flat grind it, and I sand that thing by hand with a block. So that's the reason. I mean, not only does it take you longer to make a Damascus blade because of the forging or the forge welding in Damascus, but just the work that goes into finishing it.
Yeah. You talked about this process of when all the lights go out and you are looking at something, just basically measuring it with your eye. Just as a bladesmith, which is kind of a cool picture in my mind. Which process is that happening during?
So that's the hardening.
So during the hardening process, you say you turn off all the lights in the shop, and you got it's in the forge, right? You get the forge to a certain temperature, and you're trying to achieve this certain temperature, and you're basically, you don't have a thermometer that you're gauging this off of. It's just how you're watching it harden and with the glow and the color, right?
That's right.
So the more I talk to you about this, the more you're like you're less like the dwarf that I was talking about in the beginning and more like the mad scientist. Because it's more like, it's not just this like, fire, hammer. Like it is science for sure.
It is science.
And that's what I kind of get from talking to you about it. But talk about that. Like just
like, what is that?
What that process go? What are you looking for? How do you know?
Yeah. So, something I have to mention in this technological age is a lot of people believe, I've noticed kind of a trend that people think if we're not using highly calibrated technology, to go through whatever process it is, then it's probably not accurate. And that is just not the case. Humanity's done crazy things through lots of experience and even intuition sometimes, which heat treating for me by eye it's not really intuition. It's something that is learned. So there are people that would say if you're not using a heat treating oven, you can't heat treat accurately and get repeated results. It's not going to be as good as if you use a digital heat treating oven. And I very much disagree. So I'm not flying by the seat of my pants when I'm heat treating. The key is to have experience. Maybe have somebody coach you a little bit to begin with, and then you practice a lot. And kind of what that process looks like, as you mentioned, is heating the blade very slowly in a light controlled setting, and your forge is carefully temperature controlled. Now, I don't mean like with a digital interface that's telling me the temperature of the forge, but doing the same process over again, exactly how you did it before is essentially what I'm saying. So I heat my oil the same. I turn off all the lights in the shop, but I let a little bit of light either from, light varies in Alaska in a big way from summer to winter, right? It's like light all the time in summer, which we're getting to. And then it's like dark a whole bunch of the year during the winter. So either I'll add a little bit of light through a small lamp that's in the shop, or I'll have my window open a little bit if it's during the summer. But the lights are off with a little light filtering in. And then the tang of the knife goes into the forge first. Now, the forge is not at the setting it is when I'm forging, and definitely not when I'm welding Damascus.
Yeah, much hotter.
So much hotter when I'm doing those operations. Yeah. So to give you an idea, like welding is at about 2,000 degrees, and heat treating, like forging and heat treating, you bring the blade up to about 1,450 degrees. So, but the key is to see the color entering the blade so that you know when critical temperature has arrived. When you're heat treating. So the blade the knife goes into the forge tang first, and you watch the color come into the tang very slowly, and then I flip the knife around and stick it in blade first because I want that hot tang to feed the blade, not be like a heat sink and suck heat out of the blade because the tang is cold, right? Yeah. So heat the tang first, flip it around, put it and blade first. And then I'm holding the knife by the tongs and I'm watching it. And the heat starts in the tip. And of course the tip is the smallest part of the knife.
Yeah.
And first there's like some red that comes into the blade, kind of that dull cherry red. Everybody says cherry red, right? So the kind of the dull red that comes into the blade. And then to my eye, it is, it passes through kind of a dark yellow that enters the blade. And then next, the blade begins to lose magnetism. So it regains it again once it cools back off. But when you're really close to critical temperature, it starts to lose its magnetism, the magnetic field in it, which is really interesting. The steel is transforming inside.
Yeah.
And so this kind of a darker yellow passes through the blade, and then you'll see a distinctly different color at the tip. And this is why, just through lots of years of experience, this is why I tell people, it's like, I'm not guessing. It's like, I know when it's at critical temperature. You see this distinctly different, so much brighter color enter the blade that it makes it look like, as it's moving through from the tip toward the tang, it makes it look like it's kind of like pushing a shadow out of the blade. And that's critical temperature. So once that color has fully enveloped the blade, I will let it soak for a couple of minutes. It depends on the steel type too. It's like you have to learn the steel types. Your basic high carbon steels without any chromium or other major elements added in, those don't need much of a soak. If it's got chromium in it, they need to soak a little bit longer to allow that the molecular structure to what they call like dissolve into solution. In other words, be ready to quench is essentially what it means. So yeah, you let the blade soak a little bit, and then you come out of the forge as quickly as you can and into your quenching medium. And then
which you use, was that when you use vegetable oil?
Yeah,
right? Okay.
and that's preheated. So I have a bar of steel that I stick in the forge, and I feel the oil. So that's the other thing that I learned through experience was I was cracking knives when I would harden them. That's how hard they were getting. There was so much stress in them from the hardening process that I was cracking them. And the reason for it, it's kind of counterintuitive, but the oil was getting superheated, and I didn't realize I was doing that at the time. And it was quenching though it was superheated, like it'd burn your finger if you stuck it in the oil, it was quenching much more rapidly, though the oil was really like overheated.
Okay.
So it was quenching the blade so much faster. It was like quenching in water. So you don't want to quench most of your carbon steels in water. Okay. And there's going to be people that say, well, some are made to quench in water. And it's like, yeah, even those, you have to know what you're doing. So, so I heat the oil between 90 and 120 degrees, and then out of the forge with the knife and into the oil. Okay. And it draws the hardness, or it draws the heat out of the blade. It drives down the temperature nose. I think you want to bring it down to like less than 400 degrees within, I forget what the time is, something like 8 to 10 seconds or something. I might be getting that wrong, but and that's what basically freezes. I like to think of it like freezing it there.
You've got it at the state that you want it to be.
That's right.
At that point.
Yeah, and locked it in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so once you have the blade, you take it out, then you go through the grinding process that you have, right? And then at what point do you start getting to, like, when is the actual blade itself like ready for you to start making the handles out of, the wood or antler or whatever? Like, when are you like pleased with? Okay. After,
good question.
How much hammering does it take to be like, what, I'm happy with this? Because I feel like if this is your craft, you're probably pretty picky.
I'm very picky. Yes.
And so when are you satisfied to move on to the next step once the metal is in the place that you want it to?
So it's it depends on the knife. So if it's hollow ground, when I'm satisfied with the finish of the hollow grind of the knife. If it's a hand sanded blade, I will be happy with the finish, because the finish grinding on on a hand sanded blade, it doesn't look great until I hand sand it. It's not because I didn't do the work well. It's because flat grinding perfect is much more difficult than hollow grinding perfect. But then once you hand sand and it kind of blends everything together, I'm not saying blends all the imperfections, it is that to some extent, but just the surface basically.
Yeah.
It's not that the knife isn't ground well, but it ends up looking like superior to the finished ground knife. So it's after the finished grinding or hand sanding that I etch every knife I make. I say every knife, there's an exception. I made a couple of chef's knives that are like much more affordable. And I've left them with a coarser finish grind with the purpose of just having the quality of the knife is still 100% there. They're awesome chef's knives. They just aren't finished quite as fine, so I can sell them at a lower price point. The quality is 100% there. But those are the only exceptions. All the other knives get etched in ferric chloride. We call it an acid. It's not. It's a base. So the knives, before the handles go on, when they're finished ground or hand sanded, they get etched in ferric chloride. Okay. And ferric chloride does several different things. So it is corroding the steel. It seems to act as a little bit of a resist to rust. Okay. It's a nice gray finish, and it's essentially like corroded, but it looks good. It gives blades a steel gray finish, which is the other reason I love to do it, because it means that people aren't really going to be afraid to use a steel gray knife. If it's super shiny, if it's like a mirror finish, there's people that just don't even want to use it because they're afraid they're going to scratch it. And it's like, I don't want that. I want my knives to look beautiful, but they are 100% beautiful but functional tools. And it makes me happy when people use them. Some people bring them to me, bring them back for like sharpening or a little bit of maintenance. And they're like, yeah, I hope you don't mind, and they're kind of worried because of how it looks. And I'm like, it got some rust on it. I mean, it's not a stainless steel. It's a quality high carbon steel. So it's like, yeah, that just happens. Or the blade is scuffed. It's like, okay, like that's, or the edge is beat up. It's like, you used it, like you were using it. And if it performed well for you, I'm kind of the knife doctor, so anyway, so the third reason that I really like etching my blades in ferric chloride is that it shows you the heat treatment. So it basically shows how much of the blade that I quenched. Okay. And it doesn't lie. It doesn't lie. It tells a true tale every time. So it not only shows me, but it shows the customer how the knife was heat treated. Yeah. It doesn't tell you everything about the heat treatment, but it tells you a lot. So at that point, after the blade is etched, then you're ready for a guard and handle if it's a hidden tang knife, or handle scales if it's a full tang knife. So, and every once in a while, a knife gets kind of screwed up in the etching process. There's a kind of a funny story. I forged 2 beautiful Damascus recurves. People typically just love that design of knife. It's kind of an S shape. Okay. They're beautiful. And especially in Damascus, like you're seeing the flow of the Damascus. It's super nice. And to give people an idea of how potent the ferric chloride that I use is, I etch for maybe a half an hour at the most. And that is pulling it out and cleaning it. That's like total time, maybe less. Maybe it's even closer to 20 minutes sometimes, depending on what the blade is. But I'm pulling it out and I'm cleaning the sludge off it periodically as it's etching. I left these 2 blades in there for at least 4 hours, and it just destroyed them. Wow. It looks beautiful coming out, and then you clean the sludge off, and it's like a skeleton underneath. It's not eaten all the way through, but it would go all the way through. Wow. Yeah, because with Damascus, the etching is, the 2 steel types. One contains 2% nickel, and one contains no nickel. Well, the nickel layer, when you weld all those layers together, I guess we could talk about that. Damascus,
that's what gives it that beautiful pattern,
yes,
right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's the alternating the two layers of those two steel types. And then when you forge a blade from it, that the layers follow the shape that you've forged. And then you grind it, and the grinding distorts the pattern too. And so it's called random pattern. Some people say it's not a pattern if it's random. It's like, well, that's what it's called. It's called random pattern because you're getting whatever pattern you get.
Yeah.
End up getting is random. So, so then when you stick it in the ferric chloride and it eats away at the non-nickel layer and it leaves that nickel layer nice and shiny, it's been hand sanded, nice and shiny, and it's kind of like a topographical map. So I etch my blades till you can feel them with your fingers. And the reason I do it that way is people are going to get it a little bit rusty. I mean, not everybody. Some people are going to, not clean it soon enough or, be a little careless now and then. It all depends on the person, and they might get a little bit of rust on it. And then they're going to say, Zeke, what do I do? And I just tell them, take a little bit of like 800 grit wet dry sandpaper and buff the surface with it. And they'll never sand the pattern out of the knife because it's etched deep enough.
Cool.
So
that's awesome. Yeah, it's a beautiful quality to see in those knives.
Yeah.
That Damascus. It definitely sets it apart. And then me just learning that's how it's done. Those patterns, that random patterning.
Yeah. Random pattern.
That random pattern.
Yeah.
Makes it even more special that you're like, it's not going to look the same every time.
Oh yeah. It's totally different.
It's cool.
And guys will make all kinds of different types of Damascus. Actually, the definition of Damascus is pattern welded steel. So I guess some people would say, well, see, pattern welded. It's like, there's no pattern. But anyway, it is other steel, other types of Damascus, like mosaic Damascus, where people are actually welding pictures into their blade. It actually looks like a quilt.
Wow.
And a quilt pattern in the blade, and they're making up all kinds of different patterns and welding it back up. It gets pretty wild.
Wow.
It gets kind of ridiculous, actually, in a neat sort of way.
Yeah.
So
how do you go from, you have people that you do custom orders. So someone could have like, a sheep horn or a moose antler. Right. And you're like, Zeke, I want you to make a knife out of this. So now the bladesmith becomes the woodworker, or it's part of the job, right?
That's
like you were saying earlier. How's that? Like, how do you approach that when you have this material that someone wants in their knife? What kind of challenge does that pose?
That's a really good question. So I provide most of the materials. A few people have asked me, like, hey, I have this moose antler from the first moose that I shot. Could you make me a knife and use this as the handle? And I tell them, maybe. I need to look at it and see. It's like how much curve. If it's a moose, like there's a greater chance because their antlers are just huge. But even the small ones are big, typically in girth on smaller bulls and stuff. So the bigger around the antler is, the more room I have for shaping it in a way that is comfortable. So that looks good, and I can make it comfortable, but that looks good and is comfortable. So people will sometimes ask me for something specific that they provide. Like they'll say, can I provide it? And I just say, it depends on what it is. And I'd have to look at the material first. But generally speaking, people say, I want this material. Like they see either the knives of past builds in our gallery on our website, or they'll look at some of the knives maybe we have available, and they're like, I don't quite want that, but I like some of the qualities in it. And so I let people make decisions. I do kind of guide them through the process. Like, so for instance, I don't know, like, can I go into a little bit of designing?
Yeah, go for it.
So like with the custom knife process, people will say, I want a skinner. And I'll say, okay, well, what steel type, they'll say, well, what's better, 80 CRV2 or Damascus for holding an edge? Well, you may not notice a difference. ADCR V2 would maybe hold an edge a little bit better, but you may not even notice. They're both heat treated great. So if they want the look, they pay for the look of the Damascus, right? That's what they're paying for.
Yeah.
But then moving on from there, I say, okay, so you want a skinner. Here's what I recommend for blade length. So I'll say, I don't recommend more than a 4-inch blade for a skinner. And there was a guy who ordered one from me, and I recommended 4-inch. He wanted 5-inch. I don't care. It's more money for me because I actually I price according to blade length and material type of the blade. That's the main way I price blades. But yeah, so I'll make recommendations, and they may or may not take them. There is kind of a limit to which I will go for craziness. Like I'm not going to build Gil Hibben fantasy knives for people.
Yeah.
Actually, Gil Hibben was a custom knife maker. But anyway, yeah, I don't go wild and crazy.
Yeah.
But I do design. I design knives for people. If they say I don't even know what I want, but I want a knife from you, then we'll talk. We'll walk through that. I try to be very accommodating because I eat, drink, and sleep this. And it's not because it's a job. It's because I love it. It's once again, it's the little boy inside that gets to play with fire and a power hammer and that kind of stuff. So yeah. So then we talk about the blade type and the blade design. So kind of the driving question for a custom knife is, what is this knife going to be used for? So they'll say, well, I want a kitchen knife. I'll say, all right, paring knife or chef's knife. Those are kind of the two main ones. Well, I like smaller knives in the kitchen. Okay, perfect. Well, chef's knife. Well, then I recommend something like generally a minimum of 7 inches long for a blade. I could go 6. Some people want a 6-inch blade, but generally I say like 7 inches and up, like up to 9 or 10 for a chef's knife, because you want material on either side of that onion that
whatever
you're cutting.
You're cutting. Yeah.
You don't want your knuckles bumping into it.
Yeah.
You want something big. So yeah, we talk blade designs and that sort of thing. And I just kind of hold people's hand going through it. Some people come to me and they know exactly what they want. And then handle materials and the prices of handle materials is generally keeps the price of the knife the same, unless it's something like ebony, which is very expensive and hard to find. And I may or may not have a little bit on hand that is probably not an option for people to use.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah. And then sheaths, of course. I offer Kydex and leather.
Yeah. Some of the wood types, the grain, the color, like seeing the way that color shines through once you like oil up that wood, it pops and it looks, it looks super cool. And you have such a variety to choose from, which is pretty sweet.
Yeah.
I can't remember, on your website, do you have a list? I know the types of knives that you have on there.
Yeah.
Which ones do you commonly make? So you mentioned kitchen. You have the kitchen knife, right? I saw a fillet knife where you were like burning through leather. Like it was wild. Like super sharp.
People really appreciated that video.
Super sharp fillet knife. Great flexibility on it.
Yeah.
So what other types? How many types would you say that you make regularly?
So I recently went through all my pictures on my phone because I use my nice smartphone and for taking all the pictures because they're just great these days. Cameras are awesome on smartphones. So I went through all the pictures and I divided them up into albums. And it was like, how do I categorize these?
Yeah.
Because like some knives, especially custom orders, it's like there's a couple and you're like, well, or at least earlier on, it was like, what do I call this? What category does this fall into? So I would say probably the most, you said what is the most common one? Or just what are the categories?
Which types? Yeah, like which types do you commonly make?
So I would probably say the most common one that I make falls into the category of a Skinner EDC. So everyday carry / skinning knife. Because your smaller knives, like our Chickadee model, the little water jetted knife, that's like a very popular knife that we make. That one it's perfect for an everyday carry. In fact, I've got one in my pocket right now. I'm carrying it in a sheath in the pocket. That one's great for everyday carry, but it's also a super great skinner because it's just very handy in size, and it's got a good. It's kind of a spear point, or think a surfboard blade shape. It's really practical for lots of things. So it'll double as a skinner, and so that category of Skinner EDC, that's really, really popular. I think we probably make more of those knives than anything else. Not chickadee specifically, just that category.
Yeah.
And then let's see. I don't make a ton of fillet knives, although I'm getting a lot more interest.
Okay.
And I mean, they're super high quality.
Yeah.
The fillet knives are really, really high quality. High carbon steel. They're not stainless. Great for fresh water. Fine for salt water if you're going to fillet your fish and then wipe them clean and throw some oil on them. And then let's see, I don't make much in the way of fighters. I certainly have, and I certainly can. And there's a go-to. It's a Japanese Hisatsu. That's kind of the go-to if a person's looking for a tactical knife that I recommend. I haven't made one of those in a while though. And then, choppers, those are really fun. I haven't made enough choppers.
Is this like the kitchen knife that you're talking about?
I'm sorry. No, this is like think kukri.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Nepalese Gurkha
knife.
That type of knife.
Yeah. Okay.
So those are really fun. One of the first ones I remember making, I couldn't believe how well it cut. I did a lot of things right, and I probably didn't even know how it all came together at the time. I do now.
Yeah.
Like I for sure know now, kind of the mechanics of how it all worked well. But I was kind of hooked at that point. A buddy of mine, a really good friend of mine, cut through a piece of, I think it was like 4 inches across, and he cut like most of the way through it in one swing.
What was it that he was cutting?
It was I'm sorry, I didn't say what it was. It was like a poplar or something like that, which isn't like a super hard. It's considered a hardwood. It's like a softer hardwood.
Yeah.
But he cut like most of the way through it in one swing. Like I could not believe how deep the blade buried into that.
Wow.
Those are really fun. And then I'll make cleavers. So I haven't made much in the way of cleavers. I made one that was like, it had the fire scale on the back. It had the drifted eye up in the front. So like the hole up near the front. And I've got a funny story with that in just a minute if you want to hear the story. It was used for very humanely dispatching an animal.
Okay.
And then kitchen knives. And the kitchen knives are pretty common also. So yeah, chef's knives. And actually it's interesting with chef's knives, I had been making all kinds of other knives, and then the idea of making kitchen knives was kind of a new concept for me. And I started making them and realized just how tricky they are and how different like a chef's knife is from a regular, just a regular knife. They are such a totally different animal, so to speak. So, but so that was just like mastering something totally new.
Yeah.
And those are really fulfilling because it's a knife that everybody has to have, right?
Yeah.
And I would just say, like, people can justify a little bit better spending money on a chef's knife because you need it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you got to have good kitchen knives.
Yeah.
And whereas a Damascus everyday carry, it's kind of like, some people are like, I have money, no problem. And other people are like, I can't justify that, you know? So
tell me the
story,
the cleaver story.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is really funny. So this blade, this guy comes to me and he says, I want a cleaver, like a really big one. So if I recall, the blade was like 10 inches long. I forged it. I want to say it was like 3 inches wide. And then it had fire scale, which is actually called, in the knife community, it's called brute de forge. So it's a forged finish. The fire scale from forging is left in the back of the knife. and then I fitted it with a copper like collar,
Okay.
and then a black micarta handle. Micarta is a synthetic material that's super, super great for synthetic handle material. And then I'm like, I've never made something like this before. So I ground it. I left it pretty like significantly thicker because I'm like, this is a cleaver, so it's meant to go through like joints and maybe some bone and not deform. That's asking a lot. So I left it really thick at the edge, and then I just ground it like an axe or Scandinavian grind, kind of.
Yeah.
Ground it to sharp, and then the customer just absolutely loved it, and he picked it up. He just loved it, and then he worked with my brother-in-law for this electrical company, and I want to say my brother-in-law texted or called me and said, "Hey, you should get a hold of so-and-so and ask him what he just did with the cleaver." So I called him, and I said, "Hey, I was told I need to ask what you've been using this cleaver for." He said, "Well, I used it to cut some lettuce in the kitchen," which is kind of ridiculous for cutting lettuce, but like, "Oh, how did it work?" "Oh, it worked really good. Yeah, I cut some spare ribs with it too." But he said the best thing is I killed a sheep with it. And I said, "Oh, no kidding." I said, "How did that go?" And he said, we went to the local 4-H auction, and we bought this sheep. And he said the poor kid who raised it is telling me, he's walking me through the different humane ways that I can kill this sheep for harvesting the meat. And he said, I told him, I'm just going to kill it with a big knife. So he said the kid's eyes got about that big. And so he said, we brought the sheep home, and I told my wife, "Yep, I'm going to kill the sheep with my cleaver." She said, "Me and the kids will be inside."
Yeah.
Because I asked him, I said, like, did you video this? Like, did you like what? And no, he said, my wife said she and the kids would be inside. So he said, yep. He said, one swing of the cleaver, I cut its head off. Here's my, I'm not trying to be too gruesome here.
No, it's all good.
But here's kind of what I'm picturing. So growing up, we butchered animals and stuff, and specifically chickens. It's like the old head on the chopping block, right?
Yeah.
Like swing for the fences, you got something to back it up, right? A good solid surface. I said, "Oh, so you laid it down and on the block?" And he said, "No, it was standing there." He went Old Testament on it, Manny. He goes, and he just swings. He said the head was hanging by a little bit of skin at the front of the neck. Wow. And it just blew right through it. Wow. And I couldn't believe it.
That's awesome. That's a great, that picture of just standing over the top of it, this giant cleaver, and just full force
just
coming
swinging
down
for the fences.
Yeah.
It's like you got to make sure that's one thing I realized from cutting with bigger blades is you got to make sure your other arm is out of the way. Like you can't just swing and hold your other arm out here to balance yourself. Like move that thing out of the way, put it behind your back or something.
You don't want it in the way at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
so
awesome.
That was quite I think that's probably about the wildest knife story. I did have a customer who came into my shop. I was thinking about whether to say what he did. Anyway, I won't. I'll be polite in case he watches this.
Sure.
So he had bought a kitchen knife from me previously, and then he asked, he wanted to buy a Damascus everyday carry with this spalted, which is slightly rotten birch handle. But when it rots, the birch rots, it gets this crazy character in it.
Yeah.
It's just incredible.
You showed me some while I was at your place. It does look amazing.
Isn't that amazing?
And you have this whole process that you go through to like make that.
Yeah, I've mostly sourced
solid.
it from a friend.
Okay.
But I'm getting ready to cut up some of the spalted birch, and I'm going to send it away. It gets stabilized.
Stabilized, that's what you were telling me, yeah.
Yeah.
So that it maintains that look, but it's actually durable.
You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you can polish it and stuff, and it just, the character of the wood is just incredible.
Yeah.
So And so this guy comes to the shop. He orders the knife. I make him the knife. It's got this spalted birch handle, and it's a Damascus blade. He comes in. I get it sharpened for him because I wait until like the last minute to sharpen it. I take it over. I sharpen it for him. Turn around, hand it to him. He takes hold of it, and then I walk over to my bench on the other side of the shop, and he fumbles it, and drops it, but he grabs it again, and it's razor sharp. Oh. And he cut. I can't remember which finger it was. It was one of his pinkies, and I'm talking like if you're shaving with this with a freshly sharpened knife, it's almost like you're just blowing the hair off your arm. It's coming off like it's so sharp. It's unbelievably sharp. And he grabbed that blade. Then he bled on my anvil, and he bled across the floor, and he bled all, and he was apologizing, and I was apologizing. I'm like, oh, I am so sorry. He said, nope, it was my fault for grabbing it. Man. Yeah.
Use the same rules you use here with your kids. I'll give this to you next year, sir. Maybe you get another chance.
Oh no.
Oh man. So if someone wants to care, like how do you care for these knives? So like you have this quality, quality blade. You want to use it, but you want to take care of it. It sounds like some people reach out to you for resharpening and stuff. Do you have like guidance on what you tell people?
I do.
So what do you usually go through with them?
Yeah. So caring for the knives is actually really easy. We kind of live in a throwaway culture. Not kind of, we do. Although I'm seeing a resurgence of finely crafted, like handmade boots and leather bags and handmade knives. You know, people are starting to appreciate handmade quality again, which I really love seeing. But with good quality handmade, like you have to care for something like that if it's going to last. And so caring for our knives is really, really easy. So if it's a kitchen knife or if it's a skinning knife, something that's going to get liquid on it, I just recommend people when they're done, like I'm not saying as soon as you make a few cuts on an onion, immediately wipe the knife if it's a kitchen knife. But it's like as you're working in the kitchen, process your meat and fruits and vegetables and that sort of thing. And then when you're done, I don't mean when you're done eating, eating the food that you've cooked, then come back and clean it. I mean, when you're done processing the food, cutting it up, and you're done with the knife, I just recommend you just rinse it off. You can use soap if you want to, but at least just rinse the blade to get the acidity off it. It's gonna, if it's in the kitchen if it's something that's introduced to water, it's gonna get a patina on it, which isn't the same as rust. It's like maybe beginning stages of rust, but like old silver, like old silverware will get, it'll kind of corrode, but it's really a patina, and it's got kind of a shiny, kind of a multicolored look to it a little bit. You'll start seeing some of that on it. But if you just rinse it off and then dry it and then take whatever oil you use in the kitchen, it can be avocado oil, vegetable oil, olive oil. That's what we use. In fact, that's the one oil I use in my shop for oiling our blades. The blades is even finishing them and stuff. I'm using olive oil.
Okay.
It's just a food grade oil, and it's great for the blade. The blade loves it. You just throw a little bit on there, and then I'll just like wipe it with a paper towel or something like that. And some of the knife handles are just impervious to water and whatever might get on them. More the synthetics and stabilized handles. But the ones that are treated a little more naturally with our hot paraffin wax dip that we do, those are, I mean, they're going to hold up really well. But it's like if you're going to oil the blade, just oil the handle too. Throw some oil on the handle. And I don't mean this long drawn out process. It maybe takes 10 seconds to do it. Just throw it on there and just kind of wipe it down and then back in the sheath or whatever. And you're done. And that's going to help maintain the edge because there's not moisture sitting on the edge to like most people aren't going to notice, but there is the tiniest bit of corrosion that's going to happen if you just let a blade sit there wet.
Yeah.
So yeah, really simple.
It probably depends on the amount of use and with the type of blade that they have. But what about like sharpening?
Oh, good question.
You know, like do you recommend people, you know, you have a nice quality blade like this, you know, you've put a ton of time into
Yeah.
getting it just perfect. You know, are you like, yeah, go for it, Johnny, just sharpen the heck out of that thing whenever you want to? Or is there like, is there a certain method that you want them to use, or, you know, what advice do you give?
So it's really up to them. If it's, you know, if it's rode hard and put up wet, that's kind of up to them.
Yeah.
But as far as and you know, sharpening is kind of one of those things that I don't know. I guess I don't have a good feel for people's ability to sharpen these days. Some people say, I do all my own sharpening. And those people are kind of rare. A lot of people kind of do their own sharpening. In other words, they kind of try to put the edge back on because maybe they don't know what options they have. And sharpening on a stone is not something that's super common. It's more common in certain parts of the United States. But I think it's one of those things where, well, I mean, currently at least, our business offers free lifetime sharpening for our knives.
Sweet.
So people can bring them on back. If you're out of state, which we do ship out of state. In fact, we have knives in Israel. Awesome. But a customer there, but it's a little less feasible to get them back to us. So I will sharpen for people for free.
Cool.
They're just going to pay shipping, right?
Yeah.
So, but if you're local, I sharpen for free. So, but if someone wants to do their own sharpening, I usually recommend like a really extremely fine whetstone.
Okay.
And sharpening takes a little bit of practice, but it's really not that hard to do. Is it going to be as perfect of an edge as I can get the methods that I use for sharpening? Maybe not, but you can do a really good job. And some people are just phenomenal on stones, and it would be just as good as what I can do.
Cool.
So yeah, and so I'll point people in the right direction when it comes to different sharpening stones and that sort of thing. So, and obviously too, if you don't let the edge get away from you too quick, you know, for leaving it for too long, dulling it, then it's going to be easier to bring it back. So
one of the last things I kind of want to talk about is anytime you're passionate or love something, such as you do with bladesmithing, I think if I try to equate something that I'm really knowledgeable with or enjoy or love and want to be a part of, is in a smaller aspect, is I love baseball. I love following baseball.
Yes.
I love coaching. I love, you know, the game, the sport, the history of it.
Yes.
And so I'm a huge fan, but I'm also really invested. And anytime you're really invested in something, you have applications to life with that. Do you think there's any reoccurring themes with what you do in the shop and maybe lessons that you learn that you pass on to your kids that come up? Do you ever see that?
Yeah. The main one that is kind of reoccurring that comes to my mind a lot is the whole forging, well, the whole knife making process. But I view the bladesmithing process kind of like trial. So, and kind of the best way I think to describe that is if I'm recycling steel, which I don't do often. Sometimes I'll take a coil spring from a vehicle or a leaf spring, and typically it's really rusty. It's not much to look at. But through the process, through the affliction, if you would, of heating in the fire of the forge and shaping with hammers, it's inducing all kinds of stress. And then kind of finishing that part of the process with, after it's rough ground, then you induce more stress into it through the process of heat treating, so hardening it where it's super brittle, but then you temper it. And what do you end up with in the end? You end up with a beautiful, functional, serviceable tool that's ready to do good work. It is so much more than the leaf spring it started out as, right? And being a Christian, I view bladesmithing kind of like what God does with us. And there's a couple different responses that we can take to trials. We can take the approach where we fight it and we hate the process and we hate the affliction and we hate the trial and the hardship and we buck it, or we submit to it and we ask God, like, what are you doing? You know, even for the non-Christian, I think that's a great question to ask. God, what are you doing? What are you trying to work in me?
Yeah.
That is good. What is this trial going to produce in me? I think trial is intended to produce something, not something that is wrecked and broken in the end, but something that is beautiful and functional that God can then use, that ends up being a huge blessing to other people. So that's kind of the main thing, I think, with bladesmithing that I see.
That's awesome.
So,
I knew there had to be something. You can't love something this much and not have like how this applies to life in general, because you're going to see it when you see the ins and outs of something. You see how it applies to life, and I think that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you get your kids involved in the shop at all? Like, do they show any interest? Like,
they do.
Yeah.
I don't get them involved enough. I'm trying to get to the point in which I can a little bit more. I have a little bit of guilt that I don't get my oldest son in there more. It's I would say it's not an easy thing to make a living doing, especially when it's just my wife and I, and I'm kind of the one-man band with the shop and the orders and stuff. And then she helps me with social media, and she's like getting more and more involved with things, which is really helpful. But I don't have a lot of time to just have little people motoring around the shop.
Sure, yeah.
And the shop isn't safe. You know, I mean, you know, like if I'm just honest, it's like saw blades turning and and hammers smashing and forges burning and all grinders grind all kinds of stuff. There's just too many things that little people can touch, and my boys are good at listening. But my oldest son wants to make some knives, and he's completed one with my help, and he's done a little bit of forging on a couple others. Our second oldest son, so our oldest is 11, almost 11. Our second oldest son is almost 9, and he claims he's going to be a knife maker when he grows up. Awesome. So we'll see. He also might be a Lego designer too. I'm not sure. Those are things we've encouraged too. It's like, hey, did you know somebody actually designs Legos? And then we look up the video of people designing in Denmark. I think it's based in Denmark, and it shows the factory. A lot of it's automated, but there's people like designing, like grown-ups, and they're building Legos and designing all this. So we're trying to feed that with him too. But yeah, he says he's gonna be a knife maker when he grows up. So
sweet.
So we'll try to feed that as well. Where I'm not trying to, I kind of try to take a hands-off approach when it comes to pressuring. I want them to know they can do what they want as long as it's morally right and good in life. And I don't want to stand in their way. Yeah. I want to blow on the coals of their dreams, not stomp them out.
That's a cool way to put it.
So
yeah, blow on the coals of their dreams.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, thank you for coming here and talking about your craft, because it is art, and I think you do a masterful job of creating beautiful, functional knives. And to have a bladesmith on the show, I think I'm probably not gonna have another one. I'll be confident that you are the bladesmith.
Thank you very
much. And I really appreciate you just taking time out of your day to come and do this. So
yeah, you're welcome.
I want to talk about how people can connect with you. So you just kicked off a YouTube channel,
I did.
Alaska Blade Studio, and you get to see kind of a glimpse of what you're doing in the shop, and it's pretty sweet. And I think people are liking it. You just started this thing, and people are excited about it.
7 or 8 days ago.
Yeah. And tens of thousands of views and people loving, I think, the content that you're putting out there. And like you said, you're just, with your phone, taking the videos of just little glimpses of the parts of the process. And I think with that niche of people that are into either that creating or just the beauty of what you're creating is catching on. And I think
thank you.
I think that you're going to do really well with that YouTube channel. So if you're listening and you're interested, definitely go and subscribe to Alaska Blade Studio on YouTube. But alaskabladestudio.com is where people can go and actually look at and kind of see the price points on which knives you offer. Some of the more details of like your process in creating them and
past builds.
And stuff that you've done in the past.
Yeah.
So anything you want to say about either of those things?
Yeah. So we just rebranded it, and it's Alaska Blade Studio. And so our website is new and it's rocking and rolling. It's actually, we just got our new brand put on the website a couple of days ago.
Yeah, it looks great.
So thank you.
Yeah, it looks great.
Thank you. There's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears put into getting that edited and made right. We didn't build it. We had somebody make it for us off of Fiverr. If you're familiar with the company. But basically, so that's up and running. There's no merchandise yet, but there will be soon on the website. So there's a merchandise page, and it says, merchandise coming soon.
Cool.
So we've got some really nice things planned. The quality of our merchandise is going to be akin to the quality of the knives we build. We are not going to have quality knives and junky hats.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying we're not going to have hats. We're going to have hats, but all the product that is going to be on our website is expect the same quality that you see in our knives.
Sweet. So what kind of merchandise are you guys anticipating?
So we're planning on doing nice decal stickers. I'm picky about my stickers because I love stickers, and I get new ones and from various places, and they go on my power hammer. And some of the quality of the stickers is not good. And the way I test it is when it goes on the hammer, I can actually tell now by feeling them, but when it goes on the hammer, it's an oily machine. Yeah. So if oil affects the sticker, starts bleeding into the sticker, I can tell it's kind of a poor quality sticker. So we're going to have some really nice, the plasticky decal type stickers. We're going to have some really nice, probably kind of trucker hats, but I typically wear a little bit different style hat. This is the old brand. Okay. And probably some trucker hats, that sort of thing. And then some really nice t-shirts that fit well, not like giant baggy things, but nice fitting t-shirts. Men's starting out. I don't know if we'll do women's. Depends on if we get it asked for. And then stoneware mugs. So there's this company in Wisconsin, and I can't remember the name of the company, but they make these handcrafted stoneware mugs, and you can have your logo stamped into the what would you call it? The medallion or whatever on the front of the mug. Yeah. So we're going to do those too. Cool. And so we're looking over designs and stuff for the different types. So
that's exciting.
So those are kind of the main things that we're hoping to do actually here really soon. So merchandise on the website. We have some knives available right now. I think we don't have a whole lot because I'm a one-man band. We've got 6 blades on there right now. I'm working on getting a couple more finished up to drop onto the website. Okay. And then past builds, the gallery of past builds. There's some beautiful stuff on there, and then custom orders. I kind of have our method for custom orders, a page on that. And there's a few more pages coming soon to the website, but it's very workable right now. You can check out. This is actually kind of cool. Our knives are not inexpensive. So with Shop Pay, which is really cool, that's who processes our credit cards
Shop
and
Pay,
stuff.
To how to actually make a payment online.
Yeah. You can do 4 interest-free payments for a knife, which is crazy.
Oh, gotcha.
So for the more expensive knives, if people are I kind of want to budget this out, you can do that.
Cool.
And
without any interest.
Without any interest.
Oh,
so
sweet.
No interest. Yeah, it's 4 interest-free payments, and for one of the more expensive knives, I think our most expensive knife on there, it's more than 4 payments, 4 interest-free payments. Gotcha. So that's kind of neat. The YouTube channel I created on kind of a whim. I made one before, and it just didn't really go anywhere. This one, Alaska Blade Studio. I created, I think it was 8 days ago, and I think we have over 106,000 total views right now. We had our one video is over 37,000 views, and we've had that for several days now. It's been over 37,000, which is just blowing my mind.
Yeah. That's a lot.
Yeah. Like we got, there's one of kind of showing how quality our sheaths are, where the knives clip in.
Yeah.
Because we do this hot paraffin wax dip, and it makes it like a plastic almost, but it's all the qualities of leather, and it retains the sheath really well, and it sheds water. So it's like showing me clicking it in, and that's I did that 2 days ago, and it's got over 17,000 views.
Yeah.
So the YouTube channel's been good. I think we have like 77 followers, something like that. I can't remember.
Which is not
75.
Which is not a lot considering how many people are watching these videos.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I think like what's being put out there is definitely grabbing people's attention, and is like
way faster. I mean, it's still growing faster than I thought.
Sure.
Even with the subscribers. So,
yeah, Alaska Blade Studio on YouTube. And then what about, are you guys active on like Facebook or Instagram or any of the other social things or no?
Yeah, so Facebook, we actually we had a business name attached to our first brand, but we're not really doing anything with it. So it's actually me and my wife's name, Zeke Bethany. So Zeke Bethany, just how Bethany is spelled. Both, first letter of both names capitalized, and then Johnston.
Okay.
So a Johnson is a Swede. Johnston is a Scot. So there's a T in there.
I didn't know that. Good to know.
Yeah.
All right.
So Zeke Bethany Johnston. And our website, if you go to our website, alaskabladestudio.com, and you scroll down to the bottom of any page, there's links to Facebook and YouTube there.
Perfect.
So,
all right, cool.
Yeah.
Well, and you have a knife giveaway going on right now.
Yes.
Unfortunately, by the time this gets aired, it'll already be over, but someone will be a proud owner.
One.
There'll be another one?
Oh, there will definitely be another one.
Sweet. Well, all more reason to follow you guys to find out when that will be.
Yeah. And it'll maybe be a knife of a little bit more elaborate workmanship.
Gotcha. Cool.
So I'm having so much fun with this first one. Everybody's super excited. So I've got to do another one.
I entered into
Thank
it.
You.
Yeah, I know.
I appreciate it.
And I will enter, and I'll enter again too. Perfect. Next time it comes around.
Only enter once this one.
I'll only do it once this one. I'll wait for the next one to do it again. But I'll definitely be, summer's coming up. People are going to be out doing fun stuff. Hunting season will later on in the fall. I'll definitely be, hey, is that a Alaska Blade Studio knife? And they'll be like, what's an Alaska Blade Studio knife? And I'll be like, well, let me tell you what it is. We got a bladesmith on the peninsula, and if you don't know about him yet, then you're missing out. Because I think it's a cool thing, man. I mean, making knives in Alaska, we have no shortage of guides, hunting guides, fishing guides. Yeah. And I'm sure, they've got their go-tos, their old faithfuls, but I mean, if I'm in that position, I want to have something that was handcrafted here with the attention to detail that you go through that looks amazing. Yeah. I think it would impress, their clients, and then also probably get their clients excited about, just to have something like that. We were talking about like heirlooms,
crafted in Alaska.
Like, to commemorate that trip that you're taking, like to take a knife like that home with you. I mean, that's just next level stuff. Yes. So, not bagging on Benchmade or Gerber, but I mean, like this has a much more unique and meaningful story. So I hope that's what people see through this is it's no joke what you're doing, and there's not a lot of you out there, I'm guessing.
No, it's the numbers have grown, but still, it's not a huge number, and even fewer those that do it full time. So,
cool. Well,
thank you, Manny.
Zeke, thanks for being here, and we'll probably have you back just to talk about other stuff. Good. I mean, just talking to you, we've talked about some other stuff besides blades, but I think it'd be cool to have you back and talk about something else. So
sounds good.
Thanks for being here, man.
Thanks.